Hi everyone, welcome back to episode 5.5 of The Truth. And this episode is about the truth about the environmental movement. And sorry I had to add in a 0.5 episode. The last one about nationalism was just something that I did feel needed to be added to the series, just to help explain some things that are being demonized in our current times, to help support the narrative of the left. Now, this episode is probably going to get me more hate than even the episode on ufology. I think I could get a lot of hate on this one because a lot of people have eaten so much propaganda that getting outside of their echo chamber and thinking outside the box is almost impossible. It's very difficult for them. And let's get straight to the point, and let me just express that the environmental movement, in a nutshell, is a communist movement to control the masses by using fear tactics. Now, I am not saying that there is no risk of environmental degradation to the point of actually making the world inhospitable for humans. I'm not saying that, because that is a real thing that's very possible. It's in fact possible over an afternoon if we're ever to use massive amounts of nuclear warfare to battle enemies of the US, or, if you're another country like China or Russia, you get the point. International nuclear holocaust would destroy the world. Now, I am all for getting rid of nuclear weapons, but I'm also all for mutually assured destruction. So I think there is a place for nuclear weapons to be had and held on to by every powerful government that is stable. And getting back to the point on environmentalism, I believe that the greatest threat of environmental degradation is in fact humans, other than Mother Nature. If you didn't already know, a volcano puts more ozone destructive molecules into our ozone than pretty much anything humans have done from the beginning of time, every time a volcano goes off. So a volcano just trumps anything we've done to the environment. However, airplanes also put terrible molecules into our upper atmosphere, more so than I think your average commercial airplane, like an A380 or something, puts something like the equivalent of 600,000 automobiles emissions, and that's per flight per day. Like one flight of a plane versus 600,000 automobiles drives in one day. So I'm not arguing that we can destroy the environment. I'm not. And furthermore, I think that it is important that governments protect the environment, including a small government like a minarchy. I think some degree of protection of the environment is important. You need to protect certain wildlands and wetlands that are important for an ecosystem to exist. Right now, worldwide, we've been seeing a terrible situation in the oceans where coral reefs are being bleached and dying, and that means homes of millions of different diverse marine life will die with them if we cannot find a way to save the oceans. Now, if you reduce biological diversity that much, that fast, I do believe you could create basically a spiral out of control that ends up basically destroying the world's ecosystem, because too many important species that help support each other, the food chain, could basically just disrupt what is going on, on the planet as a whole. Also, I believe that overpopulation is probably one of the biggest dangers of our times. I believe that countries like Japan and Russia should not be ashamed of, but actually should be somewhat proud that their population growth has become extremely stable. In fact, Japan can have more babies. They should have more babies. But then, on the other hand, countries like India and most of Africa and the Middle East are having way too many babies. Most of Central Europe and Europe as a whole has a very stable population growth. So I'm not saying that I think we're going to destroy ourselves because our population growth is too high. I think just the rest of the world needs to get on the same playing field here. So, consumption is increasing, but the population growth has been declining, which is, in fact, I think, a good thing. So protecting the ecosystem and wildlife is important for the survival of people. With an ever-growing population currently, countries like Japan, Indonesia, the Philippines are finding that they have overfished their fish populations as well. And those entire countries depend on their fish for food more so than many other countries. So as you can see, a population that's too high and consuming too much is going to destroy the world. So I don't think my concerns about the environment have to do with humans, but not necessarily of what we're putting into the air so much. I think it's more of how we're destroying nature, how we're building over land, we're destroying wetlands and such so that we can make playgrounds, residential neighborhoods, supermarkets and roads and such. I think we need to basically do what we've already done, which is decide on certain areas being protected in advance from human development. So I think we've done a lot of things we need to. I'm glad about that because there's a lot of other topics that we haven't made the right decisions in advance. For example, AI, we haven't done anything there to protect humanity against a creation of an artificial intelligence, which has the potential of maybe wiping out all of mankind. Sounds a little crazy and far-fetched, I know, but if you've got an AI that is a supercomputer that can, in fact, do what something like, I don't know, all of humans have done since the beginning of mankind in basically a couple of days or something, a computer that is that intelligent, I think it poses a great potential threat to our existence. Could easily create, Skynet that you see from Terminator, and basically, who knows? Who knows what it could do? I'm not saying that it's going to create humanoid robots that will hunt us down with lasers. I think that's far-fetched, but getting control of our nukes, maybe destroying half the population to slow us down. Who really knows? Just putting it out there. Now, I want to get back to what I think the actual truth behind the modern day environmental movement is. A tool for communism. So, not long ago, the left was screaming about global warming. And scientists that were real scientists were arguing, global warming doesn't seem to be much of a problem. The actual increase in heat has not done very much. And then speed up the timeline. Nowadays, people are saying, well, global warming is not what we're seeing. We're seeing a potential global cooling initiating now. And yes, we're seeing droughts in areas you haven't seen before, like California. But that doesn't necessarily mean a global cooling isn't about to take over. What we do know from science is that when enough water melts from glaciers, ice caps, you actually raise the water level worldwide to the point where you end up starting to cool the earth, because ice and snow reflects a lot of light into and back out of the atmosphere, so it keeps the temperatures lower. But when you raise the water level everywhere a little bit and start covering up more land, you've got more evaporation, you've got more means of creating rains into places where there weren't rains before. I'm being very, very simplistic here, talking about some science that I've heard other scientists talk about. And I want to be clear and say I'm not a scientist, and everything I'm saying is based on science I've heard from other scientists. And I encourage you to do your own research, but point being is this. They've changed their strategy, the left, to be now being about global change. And in all of my previous videos, you've heard me say the left and communists, which are basically the same thing at this point, are anti-nature. And they are anti-nature. They don't want climate change. That means they don't think we should be allowed to let the environment do its own thing. We should be controlling it. I cannot tell you on how many levels I think this is just reprehensible and terrifying. I think to protect the world, we need to protect its sustainability by safeguarding wildlife and Earth. But I'm not saying that we have to use communism and socialism and massive amounts of laws to say that you cannot use certain fuels, because in my opinion, the free market will stop using fossil fuels faster than a communist dictatorship, and that's because people want to buy into saving the Earth. So instead of forcing them to do things, and instead changing our minds like they have me and millions of others, we can see an increase in use of solar panels on people's houses, electric cars and automobiles, so that you can use means of creating energy that are a little bit more renewable or sustainable, such as, in my opinion, nuclear is more sustainable for the time being because we have enough fuel for hundreds of years, and it creates a lot of fuel. And that will give us time to start getting off of fossil fuels altogether with. And who knows, maybe we'll figure out cold fusion. But the point being here in this video is not about any of these things I've talked about, but simplistically, it's about the left trying to control the environmental movement as a whole, to use it as a fear tactic to control the world, using world government. So right now, not a lot of people are paying attention, but there's world summits going on all the time, worldwide, El Rio, Tokyo, Paris, Helsinki, Berlin, probably places in America, but I think America is actually one of the least friendly to the environmental movement for, I'm not sure which reason, but what I do know is that the science doesn't support this movement to control nature and to stop climate change. The science says we need to mitigate uses of things that do create ozone depleting molecules. That's a real thing. We want to get rid of those. That's real. Okay, that's science backed up. But then the science that says we are going to destroy ourselves in a matter of short order here, and that something like the Day After Tomorrow movie is going to come true, that's just so unrealistic in so many ways. And they want to use fear tactics to try to control your buying habits. World government is the most important thing here. They do want to control world government, and they do believe that using fear tactics to basically push a narrative that will make you decide to allow for a world government in order to save the environment is going to be a viable option. Hopefully that makes sense, so I'm going to say it again. I think the environmental movement is a tool of the left and communism, especially communists, which again, and you might have heard from previous videos, is basically the 0.00001% of the population, like basically maybe a few hundred people worldwide, maybe a few thousand, but they believe in a world government, control all the masses, and that they will basically be gods at the top. We're talking about the George Soros types, the Rockefellers, Rothschilds. I could go on. But this video, again, is about the environmental movement and why I think, for the most part, it is a farce, because the science doesn't back up their fear tactics they're using. The science backs up that there are very specific things we can do to help save the environment, and if we do those things, then we will be in a much better place than we are now, sustainability-wise. But right now, we're not in any immediate danger. And the Earth's ability to close its own ozone was maybe an act of God, or maybe it's simply nature. And for these communists to want to actually control nature itself, I think is just absolutely disgusting. And I encourage you to do research into the actual science, because every time new studies come out about the environmental movement and climate change and the fear tactics they're using about, XYZ, there's usually scientists that are very, very like intelligent people that have amazing academic credentials, and they're saying, well, actually that's not true. This is the reality of the situation, and I can prove it XYZ ways. And so you need to keep an open mind, because everything coming out of the mainstream media seems to be a farce these days. So, keep your mind and ears and eyes open for the truth, and stay skeptical against fake news from things like CNN, MSNBC, and the rest. Yeah, guys, I hope this video helps some of you just open up your mind a little bit. Just realize that people like libertarians like myself, we are extremely open-minded people. We actually have done actual research into the science itself, and we've realized that this is a two-way street. It's not just the left, the liberals are right, and everyone else are stupid morons that are just ignoring them. It's not like that at all. In fact, I think the left are going to be continuing to do what they're doing in many other realms, which is overcorrection and trying to over-dominate something that doesn't need to be done. And instead of using natural market forces, they're going to try to use politics and government and the initiation of force to force the entire world, not just the US citizens or European citizens or whatever country's citizens, but in fact the entire world to behave accordingly. So if they had it their way, they'd force first world governments like the West to basically destroy their current way of life so that they consume less and have a poorer lifestyle, in order to basically make everyone worldwide serfs unto them. Now, I think that's probably a good closing note. I want to reiterate that basically the end goal, I think, is the end goal of the environmental movement is to destroy the West, to bring everyone down to more of a even playing field by forcing people to consume the same way, and if you don't oblige, you will be sent to gulags and or killed or become a slave, because communists always need slaves. That's what the gulags were for. And if you haven't read Gulag Archipelago, you don't know anything about communism. You just don't. There's no way you know anything about communism without having read that book. It doesn't matter what else you've read, guys. Anyways, I hope this comes to you in a good time in your life, guys, where you're open-minded, and I hope you might realize that libertarians like myself are not anti-environmental science. We're not anti-environmental protection. We're anti-propaganda and lies that will give world government more power at the expense of basically everyone. And the way they do it is through lies and not through actual hard science. So, again, I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. Please give me a like and subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this. And have a good one.